Thanks for coming back. We're here with Caden part two. I left kind of a big old hanging question out there for Caden, and that question was if we were at a dinner party and I was walking by, and I met Caden, and I'd be like, "So tell me about yourself, Caden. What would you say to that answer?"
I would respond that I am someone who genuinely values transience. I am from a military town, Fayetteville, North Carolina, the biggest army base in the US, and people constantly come and go all the time. And so, something that has been a really important part of my life is appreciating things for the short term, because not everything will genuinely last. So, I am someone who really, really appreciates awkward little moments, like the awkward laughter when you accidentally make eye contact with a stranger for like more than 3 seconds, and the funny like weird things that happen if you like hug someone for a little bit too long. I love that kind of stuff. And so I've always just described myself as someone who loves change. I don't get intimidated by it. It's just something I've always really appreciated because it really it couldn't possibly show the value of time as much as, or it shows it more than anything else in the world. Constantly being subjected to change really makes you appreciate every little thing.
I want to know more, Alli. What do you think?
I
Love it.
mean, it's so great, and it's not the norm having, and I'm sure you can speak to this too, Peter, is that most people resist change, resist, I like the word transience. And it's easy to just find what works and then not question it and get into a box. And there's so much power in those quote unquote awkward, moments and glances and hugs and all, and being open and adaptable to change. So I would be very intrigued if I was like, okay, Caden, let's learn more. We were at a dinner party. And so that's great. I don't know that I could have distilled out those types of ideas about myself at your age. So yeah, tell me, like, I'd be like, what else, Caden? Like,
We're giving him the entire interview right now, and there's a reason why we're talking about this. So yeah, what else, Caden? Where do you want to go?
Well, I plan on doing a lot of things. I have never been someone who has like one big goal at the end of it all, because unfortunately, the idea of peaking is the scariest thing in the world to me. And so, I'm specifically, I am pre-med, even though I am a philosophy major. Yeah, I'm sorry, that makes no sense. But so my idea of continuing this transience is by going into a career field where I know there is constantly upward mobility. I have the constant opportunity to go across fields, study more, help more people, do more research, create new techniques, because I can't be stagnant. That will never work for me. And I really just love education. And so the idea of going into a field where I can continue to learn as well as teach and create new things for more people to learn and then promptly teach, that's the dream for me. And so that's where I see myself in the future. And hopefully in the next couple of years, I will be beginning my undergraduate experience where I can kind of start to really learn more about the person that I am so that I can be a more critical and multidisciplinary thinker of the world, and make as much like positive change as I can within it.
I think where we started the whole conversation. If you listen to the last episode, we were talking about the responsibility of educators and college and all these different experiences, and we've, in my opinion, and I'm just going to throw this out there, and Kate and I have had this conversation as well, is I feel like we've gotten into this rut of box checking, just mindlessly moving forward into the next level of education without really going deep into who a person really is, or what your mind is. And we touched a little bit on that in the last episode with you, Caden, around reflective writing. But there's these, I'll just say, standardization and holistic approaches go. Like these are two very different and can be very confusing, especially to a student who is looking for a top institution to land at when it comes to college and universities. Yeah, let's tear that apart. Let's jump into that puzzle. What are your thoughts on the holistic and standardized equation? I'll just leave that there.
Well, right now we're kind of seeing a drastic shift away from standardization and toward holistic admissions in higher education, especially at the more prestigious universities. You'll see this mostly coming from schools like Stanford on the West Coast. They've not been really touching standardized testing for years now, but you're starting to see it within the Ivy League, make it as the standardized testing has become like test optional because of COVID. We're starting to see the shift. And we're starting to see that universities are opening their eyes to the reality that they're admitting perfectly amazing students at the exact same rate as they were when they were considering standardized testing for everyone. So I'm just going to be outright and say that those tests don't work. They just simply don't. I can personally attest, as someone who has recently taken them, that it is not a process that will find the best students. It's not. And this is because if you are someone like me and you get really, really fixated on making sure that you're at the absolute top of it, I will personally say I studied for 5 straight months, around 4 hours a day, around 5 days a week. I remember during my summer going on vacation and literally waking up at 6 a.m. so that every single day of it, so I could take 4-hour-long practice ACT exams. And I'm just going to say, while I did that, the very first score I ever received was a 29, which is good, not great, because I studied for over, I would say at the time, like 150 hours preparing for that exam. But the stress of taking an exam as lengthy and as intensive as the ACT, it gets to you, especially the first time you're doing it. It's just not a good representation of what a student can do. I will say eventually I resulted with a 33 ACT and a 1470 SAT because I studied for after the first exam, I studied for another 4.5 months. And now I'm teaching it to some underclassmen because I know that it's not a test really, it's a game. You learn how to go fast, you learn how to do the tricks, you learn how to use your calculator, you win more points. That's how it works. And if you don't follow the process, you will not succeed. And so even though I ended up studying that much, I still didn't quite get to the scores that I really wanted because the tests intentionally favor a particular type of student. If you are fast and you are able to get to or arrive at an answer faster than everyone else, then you will be more successful. So the problem with these tests is not necessarily that it picks out those types of learners. The problem is that it does not favor learners who study harder. It does not favor the learners who know more. It favors the learners who do easy things really, really fast. And that is just, and that's more of a criticism on the tests themselves. But even beyond that, standardized testing will not work perfectly because different education systems in the US and outside of the US teach differently. That's where holistic admissions come in. So something that we've been hearing more and more about is holistic college admissions, which basically means that they're taking into account almost everything. That means your location, that sometimes means your race, that sometimes means the way that your school system functions. Some school systems use SAT, some use ACT, you get the idea. Some have much lower scores than others, and so it's sort of weighted for that. There's a lot to take into account, but even more importantly, it means that they are taking into account other things, like things you do outside of the classroom, and they're not assigning them a percentage value on your admissions. They're taking it all in. They're getting the full picture of what you look like as a learner, and they are deciding if you are a good fit for the institution. Not that you're the best, but you're the good fit. And so I just wanted to comment on the way that standardized testing is intrinsically tied to liberal arts education is intrinsically tied to the opposite of standardized testing. When you see liberal arts education, you don't see standardized testing. That's just the way that the way that it will always work, because unfortunately, STEM education being geared toward these more career-oriented fields like coding will sort of always favor the standardization, because speed and active recall are considered very important. But within fields that require actual critical thought and nuance, these tests are not as successful, which is why you will see at these higher echelon universities that they are taking it less and less into account every year, because they are more liberal arts oriented. And so something that has been very, very heated right now as a debate has been taking away standardized testing, like those who are for and those who are against it. But really the question is, are we allowing the liberal arts side of education to continue to be suppressed by the push for STEM education, or are we allowing those who actually desire a liberal arts education to have a fair shot at universities? That's the real question of standardization, more so than if the tests are could be improved in this way or that way.
I mean, you bring up so many great thoughts there, and it's interesting because many of them aligned with what I would share in a chemistry classroom, which, right, and physics is a lot of those students who would either study really hard or were just naturally gifted at speed and just they're great test takers, which is a skill that can be learned. Like, it is a game. I would tell students to be like, oh, I only got this score, or, I need this score. And as the years have gone by, less and less colleges have been, that's been like a minimum requirement. But also, I know I shifted my own language in the last 10 years from, the ACT or SAT is really important for you to get a good score on, to it's a snapshot, do your best, write a better essay. I mean, and promoting this idea within, what I taught a STEM course, and that it really doesn't paint a picture. I mean, I remember having so many more conversations with students and because they would be like pulling their hair out trying to study, and the stress of this test for what? I mean, or the stress of any tests. There is this mentality in certain fields that like the test reveals, the score or what a kid can do, a student can do, a person can do. And it's so interesting that you yourself are seeing how ineffective it is as a student, but then even as educators, I think there's more and more pushing back on this idea in the field, because there are so many other ways to learn about a student. And so it's cool that more and more colleges are doing this holistic approach. When I was applying for colleges, and I don't know about you, Peter, but it was like, what's your GPA? What's your ACT or SAT score? Maybe you had to write an essay, maybe you didn't. And it was all a lot of numerical stuff, like what's your lexicon or, math scores, but not looking at, you might have an opportunity in an essay to explore more. But I even remember a lot of those essays being they weren't very deep. I mean, I don't know, that like it might have been like who you were, or it was like some prompt and they just wanted to see how you'd respond to it. But it doesn't sound like it was this. And there's so much benefit to a holistic approach versus, what does a number on a piece of paper mean anyway?
There's also the added issue of grade inflation, which is that so many more people now have a 4.0 unweighted GPA than ever did in the past, which means that these higher ranking universities are confused, because they're looking at a lot of papers and a lot of them have, I'll put it this way, I'm valedictorian at my school, but my GPA will mean nothing more than my class rank. my GPA means nothing, because it's not a fair judgment of who I am as a learner. Just because I had access to more college classes that I could receive A's in than another student that also would have received A's in every single one of those classes does not provide an accurate picture to a university. And so those scores are becoming less and less valuable as they are becoming more and more prevalent. And even beyond that, you can see that very, very, very few people get perfect scores on the SAT or the ACT, but those who do are not even getting into these top universities anymore, because it doesn't matter. It's not doing enough. If you have a perfect 1600, but your extracurriculars are then there's literally nothing that's pushing them to admit you, because how could they possibly see if you're a good fit for the school? Sure, you're great at taking a test, but what will you contribute to the student body? And so these are the questions that come up when these scores are becoming more and more prevalent and less and less valuable. They're having to find new ways to cope, new ways to admit. And so I think that that's the way that it started. And I think it's a great path to get started down, because the more that we can move toward this actually holistic admission, the more we're starting to see people being admitted who are actually going to be world changers. And you'll actually notice that in the lower ranking universities, they are putting heavier value on these test scores because they're more concerned about, will the student succeed? So it's like, at a certain point, they don't really need to be questioning if you are like, will you or will you not get into Harvard if you have like a 5-point difference on your a 1-point difference on your ACT. Like, it just doesn't matter as much. And so I'm appreciating the way that colleges are moving toward this, but I think a lot of people are seeing it as an unfair metric, like moving toward holistic admissions, that it would be unfair because someone might have worked harder to get their score. But really what we're seeing is that colleges are finally recognizing that it was never fair to begin with.
It's interesting. I had a conversation about a year back with a coach at MIT, and we were talking about, fit. And exactly what you're saying. It's interesting. Like, it comes through in athletics and other things, which I'm happy to see that it is evolving. Nothing's perfect. A lot of people want it to go faster and to evolve quicker. But one thing he said was very interesting. He was talking about, he could pick the talent, and he can also pick the academic talent and the athletic talent. He's like, I could pick 4.0, 1,500 plus students across the board who are athletes in his field. I don't want to reveal who it is, but and then he's like, I don't really care about that. I want to know if they're going to fit into the culture of the team, aka the culture of the school and everything, right? Which is exactly kind of what you're talking about here. And where I kind of want to go is, well, there's a mistake out there that a lot of students make of a well-rounded student, right? What their desire, colleges want, I don't know. So they mistake college's desire for authenticity, but they think they need to be everywhere all the time, right? Talk a little bit about that, like that persona, that well-rounded. I see students do it. They lose themselves, and this kind of goes back into checking the boxes, but they do this well-rounded thing, but then they really don't know how deep they are, like they really are, who they really are. So talk about that, kind of unpack that. What do you see as students making those mistakes? And I know I've made those mistakes even as a student, even in undergrad, like I made the mistakes of trying to check those boxes to go off to the next level of education or work. But yeah, can you unpack that a little bit?
Absolutely. Just to start off, I think that there is a fundamental misunderstanding between what it is to be authentic and what it is to be well-rounded or even spiky. And I'll explain both those terms in a moment. But I think that educators are coming into this, or they're coming into the classroom and telling their students that they need to do this and this and this to get into college, or that they need to be well-rounded, or that they need to have a spike in some particular area that makes them genuinely stand out. That is a fundamental misunderstanding. I think that that's the way it might have been in the past, but we're definitely moving toward authenticity within college applications, because there are actually so many more applicants now than there ever were because of Common App. Common App allows you to apply to a lot of schools very easily. It replaces the information. You don't have to send it by mail. You just submit it online and you're good to go. I mean, it's a bit more complicated than that, but you get the idea. But more applicants are applying to these, especially the extremely prestigious universities. There are more applicants than there have ever been in history. And so many of them fall into the trap of becoming one or the other type students. So just as a quick explanation, a well-rounded student would be someone who's comfortable with working in multiple different areas. Almost, it's rounded because it's kind of all of them. But that would be kind of a character archetype that would not be very common in reality. And then there would be the spiky students who are really good at math, or really good at chemistry, or really, really good at this, and then that's it. That's who they are. They found their niche. Great. But neither of these students are real. Neither of them are real people. They are manufactured by the education system because that's what they were told that they were supposed to do. Both of them. What we hope to see in the future would be an authentic student, one who explores a healthy amount and then decides on what they are passionate about and goes as deeply into it as they can. That doesn't mean that they need a spike in that area. It could be in 3 areas or in as many areas as they want, as long as it shows a healthy level of commitment to something that genuinely interests them. And that is something that we see so little of, because students are constantly trying to make sure that they have a sport on top of this, on top of that. They might genuinely be interested in something, but they would hardly be able to tell because they're spending all of their time doing everything else. Or they thought that they might have been interested in math, and then now their entire life revolves around it and they hate it. But that inauthenticity comes through in an application, always. You can always tell when something is manufactured. And so I think that there is just this misunderstanding between what it is to be a real thinking, breathing person and what it is to be either well-rounded or spiky. And I think it's perpetuated by primary and secondary education systems.
I mean, I can think of many students in my career who were like, I need to start this environmental club, and I'm on the swim team, and I'm also doing quiz bowl, and I remember sometimes having conversations with students, and I'd be like, or they join the chess league. I lots of different things to check boxes, and then they'd be like, oh, well, I actually really love to draw. Be like, well, why aren't you doing more of that? Like, why are you pursuing that? Oh, because of certain expectations, or this isn't the right path, and it's not what I'm supposed to do. And that message is dangerous. And that's what you talked about in the last episode of when students, and even like the whole system is designed to push people in a certain way or certain ways, you can lose that authenticity. And as a young person who is trying to find themselves in a very confusing messaging, that can be challenging. Like, not everyone sees the bigger picture like you do, Caden. They just don't. And so it's awesome to think that more colleges are approaching holistic admissions, but it needs to trickle down faster, right, into the arena of high school, and kind of removing this pressure system of, I mean, I stopped asking students what they want to do. How do you know? I mean, if you do know, great, but there's no timetable. And I know we talked about this when we did your episode last year, Caden, about, it should be an exploratory time for you to just enjoy the learning process and not get funneled into one modality or one thing, because you're going to miss out on maybe what you actually want to do and your authentic self by thinking you have to follow a certain path.
Absolutely. So, and it's just another form of killing curiosity. We're pushing students away from what they actually want to do. And it's not intentional. It's just what we thought that they were supposed to do. It's the old system, and it has not changed for what is now needed. There was genuinely a time when being student body president and being the captain of the debate team were alone impressive enough. There was a time. But now we need to see genuine interest. As soon as you, I'll put it this way. When I started high school, I joined SGA because I thought that I was supposed to. I'm now student body president because I decided that that was something I was genuinely wanting to pursue. But it wasn't until later that I saw that. When I first walked in, I thought, this is checking a box. This is making sure that I am sitting up there with the other kids that are going to be successful in high school. It's I thought that that's what I needed to do. But then I realized later on that it was more about the impact that I would be able to make on the students, more about the friendships that I would be able to make with the underclassmen, and the way that I would be able to change or leave my own little footprint on my school. That's the way that I view it now. And that's the way that it ties into the rest of what I value. But if I weren't able to see that because I continued down the path of doing what I was supposed to do, then I would have never found myself. I would have never been sitting here. I would have never been talking about what I was passionate about within education. And I absolutely would not have been able to make the connections across the different interests that I had that I have been able to do now.
Yeah, I just think about the how transformative this lens would be for more students and the whole educational system, just this framework of free exploring. So it's incredible. I don't think you're ever gonna have to worry about peaking either, Caden.
No. Lifelong learning. What's interesting is I'm not only reflecting on my own journey as a student, and how confused and I don't know, I got half of what you got on an SAT, right? And I was just destroyed. So I just gave up. It was and I think we see a lot of students, and I currently see a lot of students doing that. And, I have the privilege of learning the authentic student because I'm a business teacher, which I absolutely love. Whether they love business or not, it doesn't really matter, because I think, in order to be successful, like you're saying, Caden, in anything you really have to know who you are. You have to go deep into who you really are. And the earlier you can really start to identify those skill sets of doing that, the processes, including, reflective writing, but also understanding, the curiosity and the play. That's you're hitting my why, which I'm really now reflecting, and this is all coming, by the way, from a LinkedIn post. Thank you. But I'm really reflecting not only as myself as a learner, because I'm still learning. All of us are, but also about students. How are you doing today? What are you curious about today? Right. And I absolutely love that. On this, going deeper into people, people going deeper into who they really are and outside of the check boxes. Are we missing anything? Is there anything else that you wanted to hint on here? Because I think it's very important, not only for our younger listeners to hear this, but also parents who may still think in the way that they were in school. Is there something we're missing there that you want to cover?
I have just a couple little things. Number one, don't be scared of the holistic admissions process. It's scary to not know what you're supposed to do. Walking into college admissions with your eyes closed is what it feels like when you actually experience holistic admissions. It's going to feel really personal. It's going to hurt when it doesn't work out, because sometimes it won't. And it's going to feel like everyone is judging you based on the person that you and it's going to feel really, really personal. That's what I mean. But don't be scared of it, because there's going to be a school that wants you for the person that you actually are, where you will actually fit in. And second, I just want to say that don't worry if you aren't the person that we are sort of describing here. The super like liberal artsy, intellectually curious person. It's okay if you're not. Just do whatever you like. And I feel like that is such an important message for everyone going into high school, because it starts here. It does not start when you get into the workforce. It's not work at a place that you'll love. It's do what you love from the beginning. Don't wait until you're out of college. Don't wait until you're out of grad school, if that's what you choose to do. Don't wait until you're done getting your trade certificate. Start doing what you love right now, and everything will work out the way it's supposed to.
I'm almost afraid to ask Alli for final thoughts after that. That was beautifully said. Thank you.
If anyone is trying to embrace the word authenticity and has really done a deep dive into that work, it's you, Caden. And so it's really awesome to hear that. And I think you said, Peter, that parents and students need to hear this message. I think anyone in education, at any stage needs to hear this message. And this idea of how can we really start from the very beginning, developing our authentic selves and carrying that throughout our whole entire life. And there's a lot of work to be done, but I think so many more people need to hear this message. And if I know you at all, Caden, I know that you can continue to have these conversations and grow this idea beyond what maybe even Peter and I can imagine, because so many more people need to hear about it. So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me on.
And one last thing that I wanted to throw out there. Obviously, your journey is continuing. You are on LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else that people can connect with you? And because just a brilliant mind and somebody who is unbelievably empathetic as a young person, which is a superpower. Is there another place that people connect, or is LinkedIn the place for you?
If you want to connect directly with me, LinkedIn is the place. I also have an Instagram with just Caden Ketchman. And if you search on YouTube, I have a few short video essays where I discuss some more niche topics. Also Caden Ketchman. All
right. Well, that's going to wrap up this 2-part series. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate you. And for Caden and Alli, I'm Peter Hostrawser. I am not that academic student. I was not that academic student. And we're all here together, just moving forward and helping each other. So take a lot of these messages off this podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrawser or Alli Privitt.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.